Today we're going to learn how to divide a fraction by a whole number. Someone's doing some baking. They have 8 gallons of batter, and they're pouring them equally into 4 bowls. How many gallons of that batter are in each of those bowls? So to work out this problem, I'm going to do this visually by drawing out a tape diagram, and I'm going to put some bowls down on the bottom. So here are my 8 gallons of batter, and here are my 4 bowls. So the question is asking, if I take these 8 gallons of batter and pour them equally into these 4 bowls, how many gallons will be in each bowl? Well, if I take my 8 gallons and I separate them so I have 4 groups of them instead of 8 groups, then I can put equal amounts into each of the 4 bowls. And it just so happens that when I take those 8 gallons and I make them into 4 groups, I have 2 gallons in each, which I put into each bowl. And so I continue pouring until all of my batter is in all 4 bowls equally. So what does this look like written down on paper? Well, we had those 8 gallons poured into 4 bowls. That's taking a whole and turning it into parts or groups, and that's division. When we take a group of things and we make them into smaller groups, or we separate them into groups. And so we took those 8 gallons and we separated them into 4 groups. And so found that there were 2 gallons poured into each of the 4 bowls. So now we have 1 gallon of batter that's poured equally into 4 bowls. How many gallons of batter of that are going to be in each bowl? Okay, so we can do the same thing. Here's my tape diagram. Except this time my tape diagram is made up of 1 gallon. Just 1. Now I know that I have 4 bowls down there, so I'm going to have to start breaking this 1 gallon into smaller parts. In fact, I can break it in half, but that only leaves me with 2 parts, and I have 4 bowls to pour into. So I'll need to break it down even further, and of course it makes sense that if I have 4 bowls, I'm going to need 4 parts of this 1 whole gallon. And we know that when you have 1 whole broken into 4 parts, each of those parts is worth 1/4. It is 1 part out of 4 that make a whole. And now I can take those 4th gallons and put them into each bowl so that every bowl has the same amount. On paper, we can write that 1 gallon being poured into 4 bowls is like 1 being divided into 4 groups. So we took our 1 whole and we separated it into 4 groups. And then we saw that each of those 4 groups was worth 1 part out of 4 that make a whole, which is 1/4. Okay, and now we have 3 gallons of batter being poured into those 4 bowls. How many gallons of batter are in each bowl now? So, here's my tape diagram. I have 3 gallons and 4 bowls. But how am I going to separate these 3 gallons into 4 parts? That's a little bit more difficult. Let's do this one on paper. So mathematically what we're saying is we're taking 3 whole things, in this case gallons, and wanting to separate them into 4 groups. So it's 3 divided by 4. And we know from fractions that 3 divided by 4 can be written as a fraction as 3/4, which also says 3 divided by 4. And this is our answer. If we want to know what 3 divided by 4 is, we know that it's 3/4. So each of these bars, if we break all 3 of them into 4 groups, we will have 3/4 in each bowl. And think about this. What is 3/4 plus 3/4 plus 3/4 plus 3/4? That's 4 3/4. So 4 times 3 is 12. That would be 12/4. And wait, 12/4 can be simplified. Divide both by 4 and we're left with 3. That's right. So 3 whole divided by 4 is 3/4. 3/4 batter will be poured into each bowl. Now we have a pail of water, an 8-gallon pail. 1/4 of that 8-gallon pail of water is poured out. How many gallons are poured out? Okay, we have 1/4 of an 8-gallon pail poured out. So here's my pail with 8 gallons of water in it. Notice, tape diagram works just fine. I need to pour out 1/4 of this 8-gallon bucket. So how do I determine what 1/4 of this 8-gallon is? One of the neat things about English and math is that sometimes we can use the vocabulary of English to actually mean certain operations of math. In this case, a fourth of 8, the word of means to multiply or have groups of. So I'm going to have 1/4 of 8. 1/4 times 8. Now, in order for us to find out what 1/4 of 8 is, we will need to have 8 be broken into 4 pieces, right? Because 1/4 would mean 1 part out of 4 that make a whole. Well, currently 8 make a whole, but if we can take those 8 and make them into 4 groups, then we will only need 1 of them to pour out. Does that make sense? 1/4 of 8. We can see this 2 different ways. If you look at the tape diagram, if I am wanting 1 part out of 4 that make a whole, and we separate the 8 into 4 groups, and I want 1 group, then we can see right away it's going to be 2 gallons poured out. But if we also do this with numbers, we can see that 1/4 times 8 would be 8/4. But we know that 8/4 can be simplified. And if we divide both 8 and 4 by 4, then we'll be left with 2 over 1, which is 2 whole. And that was the same amount that we said we would pour out, 2 gallons. 1/4 of 8 is 2. Now, we have this 1/4 of a 1 gallon pail to pour out. The pail size is different. Let's illustrate this. Here is our 1 gallon bucket. We need to pour out 1/4 of it. And remember, in order to have a fourth of something, we need that something broken into 4 parts, one of which we will be pouring out in this case. We also know that we can rewrite the problem to be 1/4 of 1, which is 1/4 times 1. Now the great thing is that either way, this is a simple problem. 1/4 times 1, we know, will equal 1/4. We also can see it with the tape diagram. Take 1, break it into 4 parts, take one of those parts, and we will call it 1/4 because it's 1 part out of 4 that make a whole. Now we have a 3 gallon bucket. We are still pouring out 1/4. What will this look like? Here's my 3 gallon bucket. I need to pour out 1/4 of it. The tape diagram is going to be a little bit more tricky. So instead, I'm going to work with my sentence and I'm going to rewrite it from 1/4 of 3 gallon bucket to 1/4 times 3. Remember, the word of means to multiply. And we know that 1/4 times 3 is 3/4. So if we were asked to pour out 1/4 of a 3 gallon bucket, we now know that we would need to pour out 3/4 of 1 gallon. One of those gallons, we'd need to pour out 3/4 of it. Back to our baking. 3/4 gallon of batter is poured equally into 2 bowls. How many gallons of batter are in each bowl? Okay, 3/4 gallon of batter poured into 2 bowls. All right, here's my 3/4 gallon. Here's my 2 bowls. So all I need to do is separate my 3/4 into 2 groups and pour each one into each bowl, right? And we do this mathematically using division. 3/4 divided into 2 parts. But looking at the tape diagram, we can also see that 3/4 divided into 2 is the same as saying we need half of 3/4, right? So half of 3/4 will go into one bowl and half will go into the other. So in a way, in fact, in the exact same way, we are saying that half of 3/4 or 1/2 times 3/4 is also the same as saying 3/4 being divided into 2. And either way we cut this, 1/2 times 3/4 or 3/4 divided by 2, we will see that we will have 3/8 on either part, which will go into each bowl. 3/4 divided by 2 is 3/8. And 3/4 times 1/2, remember we want half of it, is also 3/8. Okay, 3/4 pan of lasagna is shared equally between 6 friends. What fraction of the pan will each friend get? Okay, here's our 6 friends. Here's my tape diagram. I need to show 3/4 of a lasagna pan shared by 6 different people. Okay, so this one whole tape diagram is valued at 3/4. That's 3/4. It's not a whole thing. It's only 3/4 of a lasagna pan. So I'm just going to mark it as 3/4. And this 3/4 of lasagna is going to 6 friends equally. so I need to slice it up into 6 pieces. Well, slicing up 3/4 into 6 pieces is the same as saying 3/4 being divided into groups. How many? 6 groups. 3/4 divided by 6. Now follow along here. This is where it's going to get tricky. Look at my tape diagram. What fractional value is each friend going to get of what's there? 1/6, right? Each friend will get 1 piece out of the 6 that we just cut up. But we cannot say that each friend gets a total of 1/6 because, remember, we are dealing with 3/4 of a lasagna pan. So we actually want 1/6, right? 1 part of 6 of, that's multiply, a 3/4 pan of lasagna. So our math should look like this: 1/6 times 3/4. And in fractions, we multiply straight across. So our numerator would be 3, our denominator would be 24, and we can simplify this, can't we? Dividing each by 3 would leave us with 1/8. Each friend would receive 1/8 of this lasagna from its entirety. They're also receiving 1/6 of the 3/4. So we can say it either way. Each friend receives 1/8 of the whole thing. We can also say each friend is receiving 1/6 of the 3/4 that were left. And so it's important for us to find out what we're actually being asked. Let's see. 3/4 pan of lasagna shared equally by 6 friends. Okay. What fraction of the pan, the whole thing, will each friend get? They're not asking what fraction of the 3/4. They're asking what fraction of the whole pan will each friend get. We need to use our 1/8. Now we have a rope that's about 2/5 meters long, and we're going to cut it into 4 equal parts. If this 2/5 meter rope is cut into 4 parts, what's the length of each part? Okay, 2/5 of a rope cut into 4 parts. So that's dividing. We're making groups of something that exists. 2/5 divided by 4, which is the same as asking us to have this whole thing cut into 4 parts, right? Divided by 4. And if each piece is part of 4, then we know that they are 1/4 each piece. So each piece of these rope is 1/4 of the 2/5, which is 1/4 times 2/5. And now we just multiply straight across. 1 times 2 is 2, 4 times 5 is 20, and we can simplify, can't we? What's the length of each of these ropes? 1/10. So, think it through with me. We had these 2/5 of a meter rope. We cut them into 4 parts. That was dividing them by 4, dividing the whole 2/5 by 4. We had 4 new ropes, right? Shorter ropes. Each of those ropes was 1/4 of the 2/5 because there's 4 pieces that made the whole. So now we took our 1/4, we multiplied it by 2/5, and we got the length of each rope to be 1/10 of a meter. Take a look at this and think deeply about this. Half of something divided by 3. Okay, let's think about this. In reality, we have a mile, but we only want half the mile. So half of a mile, and we're dividing it into 3 groups. Take that half a mile and chop it into 3 parts. What is the value of each of those parts of that half a mile? They would be worth 1/3 of that half a mile each. Again, we're taking something, chopping it into 3 pieces. We know that fractions tell us what number of parts for how many that make a whole. If we have half of something, we cut it into 3 parts, then we have 3 parts that make up that whole half, and we have 1 piece each. So one of those parts would be 1/3 of the half. And do you notice a pattern? Let's look at another. How would we complete this statement? 1/3 divided into 4 parts is the same as 1/4 times 1 what? 1/3. Yes! Are you seeing the pattern? Let's try another. What is 1/4 divided by 5? No matter what strategy you used, you should have come up with 1/20. Whether you took that 5 and recognized that 1/4 cut into 5 pieces is going to give us 1/5 of that 1/4, thus 1/5 times 1/4, or whether you drew a tape diagram, you will see that it's equal to 1/20th. Let's try another. What is 3/4 divided by 5? What is 1/5 divided by 4? And here's your last question. 3/5 of a pint of juice is poured equally into 6 glasses. Using whatever strategy you want, I would like you to solve this question. How much juice is now in each glass? Okay, what have we learned today? We have learned that a number divided by another is equivalent to the number being multiplied by the reciprocal of the other. If you saw the pattern, you noticed that when we divided a number by a fraction, we flipped that fraction and multiplied. Flipping anything is called its reciprocal. So remember 1/4 divided by 5? Well, to solve that, we did 1/4 times 5's reciprocal, which is 1/5. Here's what it looks like if we used any variable, these variables. Z divided by y is the same as saying z times the reciprocal of y, which is 1/y. Now, if that doesn't make sense, take a look at these real-world examples. 4 divided by 2. What will this be the same as? 4 things cut into 2 parts. Well, we know that the answer is 2, but how can we rewrite this using what we've learned today? 4 divided by 2 is the same as 4 times 2's reciprocal, which is 1/2. And that makes complete sense because if we want 4 of 1/2, 1/2 plus 1/2 plus 1/2 plus 1/2, that will also give us 2. So we can use this technique with fractions and dividing fractions and whole numbers.